welcome to Talk 90s to Me, where we're slippery in silk shirts from Tom Ford at Gucci, proudly showing our bum cleavage in McQueen, hanging a Fendi baguette off our arm and gazing in awe and wonder at the window displays at Harvey Nichols. Yes, this week we are talking 90s fashion as celebrated by Ab Fab's most beloved shop, Harvey Nichols, whose creative director at the time, responsible for how the windows and indeed the whole brand was seen by the world, was the one, the only, Mary Queen of Shops, Mary Portas. Hello, Mary. How are you?
I'm very well, Miranda. I'm really well. It's lovely to be cooped up in this little studio with you.
Yeah, it's nice, isn't it?
It's nice and
with our
cosy.
90s vibe.
With our 90s vibe,
Yeah. So look, you have written a few books in your time about window dressing, about your life, which wasn't always the easiest. A couple of manifestos, Work Like a Woman and Rebuild, which is about trying to establish a kind of kinder shopping economy. But you have a new book. It has an amazing title, I Shop, Therefore I Am. And it is completely rooted in the 90s.
Yeah.
When you moved from working at Topshop on the window displays to Harvey Nichols. Okay, why did you want to write about that particular time?
It came to me and it felt right because there was this retrospective at the Design Museum called Rebel. And it was 30 years of new generation designers. And I launched that at Harvey Nichols.
And new generation designers is young designers that people didn't really know about.
It was young designers people didn't know about. And I got in touch. In fact, no, I didn't. One of my old team got in touch, who was one of my team at Harvey Nichols. I hadn't seen them in years. And they said, shall we go down and have dinner afterwards? And we went down and I walked through this exhibition, which we'd launched, and I'd come up with the idea, and it was at no department store had done this, where we were giving catwalk shows to the best that were coming out of the Royal College of Art and St. Martin's.
Yeah.
So I'd sort of done this partnership with Wendy Dagworthy used to say to me, this one's going to be big, or Louise Wilson at St. Martin's would say this one. And we gave these catwalk shows to them and then gave them space on the department. We went to it. And we went for dinner afterwards and we were like, whoa, did we do that? Did we do that? And then we started regaling stories. And honestly, Miranda, we were crying, laughing so much. I just went straight away, actually, this is a TV series. And which I'm hoping it is, because I think we've just sold the rights to it to do this. And it's kind of, well, you can have that. It might not happen, but I really have this energy with this book that it will. And that's how I went, I'm going to write this. And I rang my agent the next day. I said, I'm going to write my Harvey Nichols years. So you open the book actually with your first new generation catwalk show, right? And you also explain it later in the in the book. And there are some really funny moments. Like you have, there's a lot of characters in there. Isabella Blow, who's like a really famous stylist that everybody will remember. She turns up with a load of kind of Philip Tracy hats, which are so big that you can't put them on the models because they hit the ceiling, and the whole catwalk has to be designed to go lower, doesn't it? Well, what we did was we didn't want to lose selling space because this was going to be on for like a whole week.
Yeah.
So, and the sort of financial guys were going through the numbers going, you can't remove those departments. So we came up with an idea to build above the escalator, on top of the escalator on the 5th floor, so everybody could use the lift. But what we didn't realise is when the models, who were about 6 foot and maybe 6'3" in high heels, plus Philip's hats, were just knocking out the lights. And oh my God. So on the day when we were doing the catwalk, they came in, she just went, this can't go on. And Isabella, as you knew, was just completely bonkers and fabulous in equal measure, and said, we can't do it, we can't do the show. And we just literally had to get the carpenters up to reconstruct and work through the night, just
to make a new catwalk.
So that Philip could show his first collections.
It's really mad. And you show all these kind of young designers, and then the kind of like coup de théâtre at the end is you get Naomi Campbell. And Naomi Campbell is there because she is obviously Naomi Campbell. She's like, one of the biggest models in the world. And you've got kind of like maybe, kind of less well-known models doing the rest of the show. But you've got Naomi Campbell, big coup at the end. You've got Ruby Wax kind of announcing everything. What happens with Naomi?
Well, the reason Naomi did that show was we got really known for doing these new generation shows. So it became so successful that the world press used to turn up and all the buyers internationally. So the buyers from Bergdorf Goodman would come from the States and Barney's and Saks, and they would all come, all the press would come to see who these new young designers were.
Yeah.
It was extraordinary and it worked so beautifully. Anyway, I was doing some stuff with Jennifer Saunders with Ab Fab, and she came to me one day and said, Betty Jackson's designed this collection. It's called, I think it was called Fash Mag Slag. You know, classy little numbers.
Yeah.
And can I launch them in Harvey Nichols, because we'd done so much stuff with her with Ab Fab. And would you give me one of those new generation fashion shows, right? So I decided, okay, this will be hilarious. It was my last sort of goodbye, you know, It was my last show. I knew I was leaving. And all the press turned up and I announced, normally I go out and say, right, we've got 5 great designers we'll be showing that we found from St. Martin's, Royal College of Art. I said, and then I just came out, I said, this year, and I remember all the press were there, Nicholas Coleridge from, Condé Nast, Alex Shulman, the editor of Vogue, Anna Wintour. And I said, this season, there's just one designer who was so heads above the rest. We've just decided to do one show. And it was this really cheap, shitty T-shirts and PVC trousers with Fab slag and just the worst collections. And then out came Jennifer Saunders to do as if she was the designer and just did this hilarious speech. And that's what Naomi came out at the end, because always in really bad department store fashion shows, they always have the bride coming down.
Yeah, they always have a wedding dress at the end, don't they?
So we did as a send-up, put Naomi Campbell in the wedding dress. And out she came with Joanna Lumley, caught in her hair with a wig and a bottle of Bolly. Yeah, Patsy. We made headlines, we made headlines, and it was just the ability to laugh at the fashion industry with it as well was just brilliant.
Yeah, really good. And also, Naomi turned up really late, didn't she? Which was
turned up. We couldn't start the show until she was there, and she was so late.
Yeah,
so late. And I sometimes you do those things. I don't know if you had it in your life where you do these big things. It's like whatever windows we're putting in or big events. And you're like, at the end of it, you go, why did I do that? It's just too stressful. This is just too stressful.
Yeah.
I don't know how people do events for a career.
Yeah, very hard. But I do quite like, I once interviewed Naomi Campbell in the 90s, actually. And she wasn't the best interview.
No.
And I was a bit like, I don't really know what I'm going to do with this. And then I saw her walk on the catwalk. And obviously I didn't normally go to catwalk shows. I wasn't a fashion writer. And when she was on the catwalk, I was like, oh, right, I get it. This is what she does. She's amazing.
She speaks through the catwalk.
Yeah, and it's really hard to explain to people. It's like, she just walks really amazingly. People are like, what are you on about? She was She was fantastic.
Yeah, she walks out. And at that time, because it was all the big supermodels, and I remember, seeing, Linda Evangelista did the same. She'd come down the catwalk, or Cindy, or Naomi, and it was just like, whoa. They were just of another breed.
Yeah, they're like from another planet.
Yeah.
It's really, once you see it, you think, oh, okay, I get it. But it also makes me think, okay, those clothes are not for me. They're for you. I want to kind of go back a little bit before the Ab Fab and Harvey Nichols years, just before then, because you were working at Topshop.
Yeah.
And Topshop was incredibly important throughout the whole of my life, actually, until it kind of went away. But it was really important in the 80s and into the 90s. Yes. And you were working there.
I was display manager.
Yeah, you're display manager, which means you do the fantastic window displays.
And all the in-store and the layouts
exactly.
and the visual merchandising.
Yeah, and that sounded like, I actually thought that sounds like the best job in the world. Was it really fun?
I loved it. Yeah, I loved it because I was the customer. And Jane Shepperton, who ended up running it, was there at the same time as me. We still talk about those days, where it was, I don't know if you remember this because you're younger, but I remember so vividly that shift in the 80s and going into the 90s of where it was like a jolt, is all I can describe it, of suddenly when people had money and that sort of consumerism and fashion started to speed up. And I used to be at Topshop, and it was literally, I just would love it. We'd stand outside the windows in the morning checking. You check them every morning, you check them every night. And then that escalator used to go on, and the DJ would start. 5 DJs working out what music we were going to be playing. It was this extraordinary experience of every sense came in. The music, the beat of that, the way the store was merchandised, the visual merchandising, the windows, the mannequins, the colour. It was this incredible alchemy that just took them apart from the others.
Yeah, it was really big as well. I mean, the thing that was exciting about this particular Topshop, which was in Oxford Street in London.
Yeah, on the corner for years.
On the corner, and now sadly an IKEA. But anyway, we can move on from that. Was that you kind of went down into it, and then which is a little bit like going to a club.
Yes,
there was an element like
exactly.
You're going into the club of it, and you did these really amazing windows where literally people were outside the windows kind of looking at them. You had like Boy George performing and things like that.
Marilyn.
Amazing. How brilliant is that?
And then I remember one Christmas, it was just the black and white theme, and I absolutely just put these icebergs in the windows and about 1,000 penguins I had made, and just all the mannequins in black and white. And it was joyful. I mean, it was extraordinary, but you're still in a retail business, and it's still about sales, Miranda. So you're in there and you are creating. But if the sales don't come in, the first thing they used to do is just slap a big sale poster on the windows. I used to want to cry. It was kind of like you felt you were creating something. It's like someone doing a painting and that hasn't sold. Someone just puts a big 50% off across it. In the art gallery. It's just like, what?
Yeah.
But it was extraordinary. And just some of the best years, I think.
And you really enjoyed it. And Topshop was Topshop was very important throughout the 90s. I always thought it did it kind of did an affordable version of what was going on, like on the catwalk, basically.
Yeah.
And plus kind of mad Spice Girl shoes.
Yeah.
And that's what it did. And then you went from there, you were basically told you had to go by the top bod at Topshop, that you had to go to Harvey Nichols and take that talent for window dressing to Harvey Nichols. Harvey Nichols was not Topshop, was it?
No, and I think the other thing you have to remember, this was the time of the department stores, and particularly the luxury department store, of which it would have been one. Those stores, and I think Phoenix would have been another, that was just those sort of lovely sort of, beautiful music playing inside, the smell of fragrance, which I adore when you do go in. I mean, I can still smell a department store and think this is wonderful. But it was really for people with money, and luxury was for people with money. It wasn't brand. This is before the brands took off. This was before, designer labels became designer labels rather than luxury brands. It was a very different shift. And I turned up at 1989, just that tipping point going into the 90s, and it was the Sloane Rangers. And I turned up looking like Cyndi Lauper. I'd just come out of Topshop, and I remember it was all those fluorescents were the big thing at that time. I had fluorescent orange ankle socks. I had my hair dyed, sticking out every angle. And I turned up, and they all were looking like Princess Diana, and she shopped there, and they really spoke like that.
Yeah.
And wore ruffled collars, and sort of the men had knitwear over their shoulders and drove Range Rovers. That was what it was. That is what it was. And I felt, if I'm honest, I felt culturally like this wasn't my playground, but there's also a class thing associated with it.
Completely.
Yeah, I was a working class kid from Watford that knew how to sell Topshop and, sort of Nana Cherry Buffalo. We were playing, and we'd play in the windows while we were styling it. And yet I was going into this place that was a world that I had never, ever experienced.
And also that you can never, ever break into, I have to say. You can never break into like upper class. Like nobody can unless you are upper class. That's just no way of it.
I remember the buying director was educated at the lycée, and she spoke fluent French, and she would just drop in these French sentences and talk about a couture. And I thought she was coughing. I thought, what's she saying there? Or this is the cruise collection that comes in, and understood that these women wore, collections just to go on the cruise. And I'm not talking about some cheap old P&O ferry number. I'm talking serious.
Yeah.
And I felt always out, and I just didn't have that knowledge. And I remember the first window that I designed, which I was very influenced by Peter Greenaway's film The Cook, the Thief, and His Lover, and it was just
Your Wife and His Lover, beautiful film,
stunning. I thought I'm going to do this kind of tableau vivant Baroque scheme, and I remember presenting it to her and saying it's Baroque. And I was thinking, of course, they're all these sort of very luxury and wealthy people. And she said, that's Rococo. And I just felt that humiliation, that class. I hadn't studied history of art. It actually wasn't Rococo, but...
Exactly, I was going to say, as though, like, was it though? If you say it with the right accent, people believe you. Do you know what I mean?
But I did remember that there were just those things, and particularly that era, where less and less you feel it now, but I really felt it.
Yeah,
you know?
And Harvey Nichols really was that. I mean, he really was mega posh.
Yes.
And what I find interesting about your book is that gradually you shake it up. Basically, you do shake it up. You change the way that the windows are done. You get loads and loads of pushback about it.
Yes.
And it's you that is the person that suggests that maybe being associated with Jennifer Saunders and this new
Ab Fab.
We didn't even know if it was a comedy, did you? You thought it was maybe going to be a drama, that might be a good idea.
I knew it was a kind of fashion comedy, and I knew, because she was writing it, I knew that Betty Jackson, who was very good friends with Jennifer and styled her, was advising her on what designers to mention. And so I thought, wow, I want to jump on this bandwagon. And I knew, it was really funny because it was based on Lynn Franks, who was the PR of the time, the PR.
And in fact, had been a PR for Harvey Nichols, right?
And had been. Anyway, before I came here, I was doing a talk on stage and Lynn walked in. Right? And I've written all about her in this. And I made her read out the bit where I fire her. And she then says, can I keep my discount card? Which was hilarious. But it was, so I didn't know whether, and once I'd done this sort of agreement, like they'd film and I wanted it to be Harvey Nichols, I didn't know whether it was going to be a send up. I honestly it was a risk, but also because it could have been laughing at us, but it became part of. Did you see what I mean?
No, absolutely. I mean, the thing is, it kind of was, but then
laughing at the person who was living that life. I think.
Yeah, and also like laughing. I mean, the whole of Ab Fab is laughing at fashion and models and magazines and everything. But it's also, I mean, that makes the things that they're laughing at, actually, it kind of gives them a cool factor because it's so good.
Yes, but you didn't. I didn't know that.
You did not know that. And also, you said that when you met Jennifer Saunders, I've met Jennifer Saunders, and she can be quite closed.
She was,
and she was
very
quite
laconic.
closed with you,
very laconic.
And then you took her on the shop floor, and you were like, "Oh my God," she's like making notes. Yeah. I don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah. And also because I think you think comedians are going to be, outrageous and out there. And she wasn't. And obviously it's just a huge intellect and I think to be a comedian requires massive intellect. And I don't think she wanted to tell me because it wasn't, the BBC had obviously, she was under wraps. It was her show. So it was tricky. It was tricky. She was very quiet and very laconic,
But then it turned it into Harvey Nichols, I mean, that's kind of amazing, isn't it? Yeah. So it had a kind of...
Because it was called Harvey's before. People that they used to say, I'm going to Harvey's.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, and then she said, Harvey Nichols, darling, we're going to Harvey Nichols. And it became sort of really, I think the moniker came from them, really.
And then after that, actually, that attracted more normal people in, didn't it? Because they can think, okay, I'm going to this place where Adina and Patsy go and it looks really fun. Do you know what I mean?
Totally. I think do you know what happened? I think two things happened. I think it was that. And I think the democratization of luxury, not democratization of price luxury, I think people started to earn more. They would come in, they'd start with saying, I'm going to buy a MAC lipstick. And then I want that bag by, Dolce & Gabbana or whatever. And they would save up. Now, my generation before would never have spent that sort of money. It was high street only. But, designer labels started to really take off.
Do you think that that's part of the mix? Do you remember there was always, and still now, the idea that you would mix kind of secondhand or high street fashion with something posh? Do you know what I mean? Like so with a kind of quality brand, and you would see people doing that. Do you know what I mean? That they would wear quite something normal and then a decent bag. Do you know what I mean? I think that's...
No, totally. The bag and the accessories were a major thing, weren't they, in the shoes? But also, we used to do that going down to Kensington Market, I wrote that. That's where that was just amazing, where you would mix everything. And there was the big American vintage that used to be on the King's Road. Yeah. And that was very much that feeling that went right through the 90s. But then we went into that sort of fast consumerism, and it was, when people were dressing head to toe in Burberry, and you're like, okay, I'm getting out of this now. This is just not working, And
when you were working in I'm going to continue to call it Harvey Nichols, sorry.
Yeah, it is Harvey Nichols.
So when you were working there, you did all these amazing windows, and before that, they weren't. I mean, they were fine. They showed the frocks that people did. But you did do some really amazing ones that I actually remember. There's a couple that I really remember. And one, they're both mentioned in the book. One was a kind of, you call it Carmageddon. I don't know if it was influenced by grunge, but it was like kind of cars that looked, it reminds me of Glastonbury. There's certain areas of Glastonbury that remind me of that look, which is like a kind of car. It's not like beautiful flashy cars that you're sitting in. It's like cars that have died.
Yes, it was Carhenge.
Yeah.
I got inspired. I went to the Whitechapel Art Gallery, and it was a kind of penny dropping moment. Was instead of me trying to second guess what wealthy, particularly women, bought and how to connect with them, I went to the art gallery and I saw this installation at the Whitechapel, and it was called Carhenge, where these crazy dudes in the Nevada desert.
Yeah, it's like quite Mad Maxy.
Mad Maxy had people, that's where they dumped their old cars, and they were rusting.
Yeah.
And these dudes had stacked them like Carhenge, and it was the most surreal thing, Miranda. I remember just sort of standing there going, I went to see the Jenny Savile exhibition, and I remember just standing in front of her artwork going, wow, and just being just where everything else just stopped. And it kind of dawned on me that my windows were so huge, the whole front run of Knightsbridge, where the traffic lights were just outside.
Yeah, so everyone would stop looking.
So they would stop. And why am I looking at what these fashion collections are and then trying to coordinate and come up with something that sits with, whether it was Gaultier's gone in for checks this season, or whether it's Claude Montana that's gone for pared down, purples and red. Actually, what if I just make statements that make people stop? And it was the biggest penny dropping moment. I wasn't clever enough to strategically think that. It was a really implicit and thought that came into me, and that's when I did that one. I'm so glad you remember that, because that was one of my absolute favourites, and it was just that sort of grunge, pared down look, and it was very different. I mean, a couple of people complained about it. The old trouts used to stay in the Hyde Park Hotel across the road.
Of course, because there's something apocalyptic about it. That's what I remember, and that's quite unusual. Obviously, it's like it's Harvey Nichols. It's basically a posh department store that I never went into, but that was a kind of radical move. And you think, okay, that's quite interesting. It's quite art, and it does remind me of festivals. It reminds me of certain areas of Glastonbury where they would have. People like the Mutoid Waste Company would be there, and they would make things. Do you know what I mean? It's like that.
Totally wonderful.
Yeah,
and
festivally.
It started to get, then what would happen is just these young artists would come to me and say, I've got an idea. And it just, I'd love to say it with all mine, but then I'd go, wow. And then I'd give them a chance, and they'd be working in the winters, and you just suddenly had this. And that was some of the best years of my life, just creating and starting with this idea and seeing these young art students, you're up to your eyes in it with paint. And then when that's ready, everyone's cleans up, and let's take the designer clothes and put them in.
It's so mad, isn't it? You create this mad stage set, and then you've got like these lovely little posh frocks in the middle. I like the way also, because you describe how it's done, and it's I've never thought about this, obviously, because it's window displays, and I just think, they look amazing. But it's really physical. People are like, they're banging bits together, they're using wire, they're nailing stuff. It's a physical thing that's created and then painted and turned into this stage set.
And then it's ripped out, and you are sweating, and you've got to take those floorboards up, and you've got to take them out the back, and you've got to get people it was cuts and bruises. It wasn't,
I just hadn't thought of that at all. It's very physical. And you can't wreck the clothes. Because you make this really brilliant point where, like, when you were doing Topshop and you were kind of, I don't know, the part of it would be like a pair of jelly sandals. You just bang a nail through it, doesn't matter. But if it's like shoes that are worth 300 quid, you can't just bang a nail through them, because they've got to be sold. They've
got to wire the mannequin. So you'd wire the mannequin around the waist, and then that mannequin will be wobbling. But the guys who knew how to do it, it's an art form. And that, it was at its peak in the 90s, and we lost so much post when it became how quick, how fast, how cheap can we get stuff to people, and operations. So you lost the art of this slowly taking, creating, making this stage.
Yeah, things got too fast.
Yeah.
There's another one that I really remember that you do mention as well, and I think people might remember, where there was a tree basically growing. It looked like a tree growing through the whole of the windows, and that was Thomas Heatherwick, right? And it's like, who's an amazing artist, but he, like, I really remember that. I was like, I thought it was real. I thought it was real. I don't know how he did it.
See, he was an extraordinary. We won a D&AD gold for that, and no one had won a gold for a windows, and I remember we just won that for that. And that was my last one. Yeah, with him.
Nice, Mary.
Nice one to go out on, baby.
So if you were to think about that time in terms of fashion, I often think about that time because of what I do in terms of music. Do you know what I mean? Like, music is what I write about. So I could tell you where I feel like things shifted around 95 or whatever. I can tell you what bands are playing, stuff like that. But obviously also fashion was really, really important. And you mentioned certain things. You mentioned Alexander McQueen. You mentioned Tom Ford at Gucci, which I actually really remember. You mentioned grunge, which obviously comes up. But when you think about the 90s and fashion, what do you think about?
It's interesting that you say you just think of music, because music was very influential and always has been.
Yeah.
And even the fashion shows, every show you could tell what piece of music was kickstarting and what was of that time. And that was incredible, because I remember Tom Ford starting one of his with George Michael's, and then it came out all in white, these models. There's lots of things I think about of the 90s in there. I think the transition from power dressing of the late 80s, which was very much colour, although most newsreaders are still wearing that. And I'd love to say to all those women newsreaders, stop wearing pink jackets with shoulder pads.
Just stop wearing jackets with shoulder pads, man. What are you doing?
Who told you need to do that? You don't. Be individual. Should we do a call out for that, Miranda?
Yeah, please.
Miranda Sawyer and I.
I've decided, honestly, you can wear a bomber.
Stop
it's
it.
Fine.
Wear a bomber. You'd look amazing. Get your hair cut whatever way you want. You do not have to have it toned within an inch of its life, or wear a pink shoulder padded jacket. There, let me get rid of that one. So I do remember that move from what was quite streamlined. Women had very, that sort of haircut, which I'd love to come back that you've got, but streamlined, Claude Montana, nipped in waist, very simple, Donna Karan, very much that simplified look, but powerful and colourful. Into that flip that went when grunge hit, which was massively different. And some of the fashion industry just could not get their head round it. So, that very first McQueen show that we went to, and then went to John Galliano, they were masters of creating these installations. Most people did beautiful catwalk, great music, but I remember turning up in Paris, and Galliano had done this whole thing around soldiers, and it was everything. You got given your invite. Mine was cut off of an army sleeve and stitched in, and they became just these extraordinary pieces of every part: music, theatre, physical, catwalk with the fashion. And I remember that shift.
It's creating a world, isn't it?
It's a world, and they were the masters.
Yeah.
And I write about the first McQueen show, and our managing director going, what the hell?
You hated it, right?
Because we were expecting glamour. So that real mix that went into this I remember, I write about it in the book, turning up to Paris. And one of the fashion editors, stylish, she was amazing for Elle. And I always used to look at her, and she was always so well dressed. And I remember meeting Ian R. Webb, who was the fashion director at the time. So I'm going, and I looked across and I saw Anna, and she had her hair in a little pixie cut like yours, but more sort of rungy. And she had an old pair of Farrah trousers that were half hanging down her backside, with a pair of trainers that were stained. We didn't wear trainers. These, the most you wore was a pair of Keds, white Keds. And this T-shirt that was slouched off her. And I said, oh my God, what's happened to her? And he went, it's grunge, darling. And I remember that it was literally like the lights had gone out.
So funny. Sorry, fashion, there's something innately hilarious about fashion. It's so funny.
Isn't there? And everybody then started to sort of pull that in. That was quite tricky, changing women.
Yeah.
Women. And you think about, everyone thinks fashion, it's your 30-somethings. Where the money really comes from is the 50-somethings.
Yeah.
You just look at you go, okay, right, that's selling. So all these women that were coming in for Nicole Forey, Max Mara, and then suddenly you've got ripped out jeans and, it was a completely different shift. So I remember that. I remember vividly Tom Ford. It was like nothing. He did these sexy shirts that were, it was just, you wanted to wear everything. It was slimline.
Yeah.
The shirts were right down to the navels of these models with just a touch of boob hanging out. It was the most sexy thing. And then he comes out afterwards, who's also the most sexy thing.
Yeah.
To that and him.
I do remember
that.
So that was like in the latter half of the 90s. And I remember it, the look was basically sexy rock star, really quite loose.
Yes.
And it was essentially a kind of really slippy shirt.
Yep.
Tiny
bodies.
Tiny, yeah. Well, I mean, everyone was tiny in the 90s, weren't they? They were like, there was nothing to them. And then you would have like kind of velvet, quite masculine kind of suit trousers and maybe even a kind of suit jacket, but not like shoulder paddy. And it's essentially rock and roll. It is. It was rock and roll.
Real rock and roll, but it was also that sort of 70s glam rock and roll.
Yeah.
It was sexy, that sort of...
There's something about it that reminds me of Pulp's This Is Hardcore and also Nick Knight's photography.
Yeah.
So it's something around that, really. I mean, unfortunately, you had to be very tall and thin to kind of carry it off.
I love that. But Nick Knight then came to me and, Vogue did, and said, can we photograph Linda Evangelista in your windows?
Oh, yeah, that was amazing. That sounds fantastic.
That was heaven. I'm sure you've had this, Miranda, but particularly in the music industry where I'm in this sort of, and I don't mean to sound wanky on this, but that sort of cultural moment where I know this is of my time, And that was one when Nick Knight was standing outside Harvey Nichols' window and Linda was lying on we'd done this bright green floor and she was wearing this bright green top and she had her hair done like Marilyn Monroe. And someone had tipped off the newspapers and the street was full of people just wanting to look in this window at Linda. And I was the other side of the window.
And he was taking the photograph from the street?
He was outside. He was on the street.
Yeah.
So she was in the window lying on the floor and behind him was just crowds of people trying to get a look at...
And there's also a shot the other way around because I found it on the internet.
Yes, there was a shot the other way around.
So you can see all the people.
Yeah.
It's kind of mad.
Yeah, isn't it? He must have come in and then shot from inside.
Shot the other way around.
Yeah.
Yes, because I've seen that.
Yeah.
Which obviously, I mean, it slightly foreshadows all those artists where they're kind of lying in glass boxes. You know what I mean? Everyone's just looking at them. Do you remember Tilda Swinton in a glass box?
I also remember the launch of Dolce & Gabbana, when that very first arrived. Absolutely.
So funny, isn't it? In my head, they were always there.
No, Dolce & Gabbana, they were talking about these two young Italian guys and they'd always start their cat show with a piece of Italian opera, and it just every time it was the same piece of music, which is actually the same piece of music at the beginning of Raging Bull, where he's just great, it's beautiful. They start that every time. And
you also, in the book, you do mention some things, there's a few bits that really make me laugh, and it's mostly kind of slightly, naughty behaviour. So one of the things that happened is obviously, which I completely get, is people just nick stuff. Do you know what I mean? Like, so they're working in this...
We need to talk about this.
Yeah. So people are working in this incredible shop with these incredible items that are worth loads and loads of money. They're not actually being paid that much, because people aren't. No. The people who've got the money are the shoppers, not the people who are working there. And things would go a bit missing, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
And you had to kind of go around and say, please, can you stop nicking the scarves?
Well, it used to happen quite a bit. And I mean, we had, one lady coming in to get her shoes in rain, buying her rain shoes. And the sales assistant went in to get the box where the rain shoes were, and someone had put their old Shelley shoes in and taken the rain.
That's such a top technique.
That is such a top. If that happened, then you'd get, you'd have these young women that were, in the press office booking stuff out for shoots, and they'd have to turn up on these fabulous shoots, and there'd be all these glamorous models. And I think they probably thought, I'll just slip that on and borrow it or whatever, and some things might not have come back. And then there was, one of my team who was sticking stuff down the old front trousers. Everyone thought he had a big package, but no, it was some nice silk scarves.
Some lovely Hermes silk scarves. There's also moments as well, which I very much enjoyed. There's a point where you bring over Ralph Lauren's kind of homeware, and it's incredibly important to get everything set up just so. There's teams of beige women who are coming in and angling all the pillows just this way and that way, and you get it absolutely perfect. It takes hours. They leave, and then you catch two cleaners shagging on one of the beds. That really cheered me up. I think that's just amazing.
I was working back late that night, and Ralph Lauren was flying in and staying at the hotel across to come and do the launch of Ralph Lauren Home. And he had sent over about 10 stylists to style these beds. I thought, I'll just check it before I go home. I'll just check that it looks good before Ralph comes tomorrow. And someone had left a Hoover in the middle of the floor, and I thought it was one of my team. I was like, oh, what? And then the bed was shaking, and the cleaners were in there having a good old shag in the Ralph Lauren
I mean, on one level, that's like, what an advert. Do you know what I mean? If only you could have said. So tempting. Nobody can resist your bedwear. And you also, somebody caught another one of your team, doing a similar thing with a security guard. I mean, fashion is hot.
In the windows when the blinds were down. And we used to pardon our appearance while we dress our windows. Well, that wasn't going on, love. There's another shag going on behind it.
Yeah. I like these.
Yeah,
things,
these are the stories behind the scenes. This is like, someone said, what's your book like? Is it like Mr. Selfridge? I went, that series, Mr. Selfridge, on acid, darling, on acid.
And how did you, one of the things that you do say, which I think was and probably and still is, but you perhaps didn't notice at the time, prevalent, which is just sexism, right? I went merrily through the 90s, noticing it a bit and not really, and then coming to it later and thinking, actually, that was quite sexist. And you particularly noticed it, as I think women often do, when you had children. And what happens is that essentially you have to kind of pretend you don't have kids, and people will say, oh, we've got a meeting at 8, and you're like, in the morning, and you're like, okay, that's like, how am I going to deal with that? Like, I can't actually do that. Or we're suddenly scheduling a meeting at 7:30 in the evening, and you're meant to be able to rock up to it. It's almost like you have to pretend that your children don't exist, right?
Yeah, and I think there was a slight embarrassment. I still can remember that. It wasn't one where it's like, oh, this is amazing. You're pregnant, or particularly, I remember even just going to France. There's really high, powerful, CEOs of all those luxury businesses, men. No one talked about kids, or
because they never saw the kids.
They never saw them, or someone else was looking after them. Normally, the wife, and I happened to be that wife who was actually working as well. And there'd be board meetings, and they'd go on, and they'd go on past 6, 7 o'clock, and they might go for a drink afterwards. And you're like, I want to go home, and I want to see my children, and I want to put them to bed. But you couldn't, and you didn't say that. Now, my team will just be like, I'm going now, I've got to drop such and such at school, or I'm in late tomorrow because, and you're like, oh, great, I didn't know he's doing that school play, or good. It's completely, and you think, you just, massive shift in that. Now, we could get onto maternity care and all that stuff, which we've still got such a long way to go. But there was something about, and let's be honest here, the business world is a patriarchal alpha world. And you had to fit into it. I mean, that's why Sheryl Sandberg wrote the book Lean In. Yeah. Lean into something that's not you. Whereas, now you can go, sod that, I want to create my own. But it's still there. It's still there. But it's nowhere near that sexism or the physical. I mean, I talk about, going on that shoot and getting my...
Yeah, tell that story, because I've got a theory as to who that is.
Okay. So I'm on a photo shoot. And I find photo shoots really boring. I'm just not good at it. They're slow, they take time. And, the model's there, and you're like, is the lighting right? And then just check this. And, the photographer's king, and the stylist and the ones ironing the makeup. It just takes, it's just not my speed. So I never love it. But I turned up, it's my shoot for a campaign I'm doing for Harvey Nichols. And I bend over because the model, just her little sock was ruched or whatever. And I just thought I'll bend over, and I touched the sock. And as I did so, a very, very famous photographer who was taking the picture just slapped my ass. And I remember just feeling this, and it's that moment of, do I say something?
Or do I turn around and hit him? I think there's something quite physical that rises in you. You're like,
but also, this happens. Today, and if I saw anyone do that to my daughter, who was about the same age, I'd just, their teeth would be firmly down their throat. But anyway, I didn't do anything. I walked out, and the stylist, who was a brilliant woman, who was sort of my age, and she was really together stylish, and she came up and she said, I saw that. And she said, I'm so sorry. I said, oh, don't. I just, started making myself a cup of tea and whatever. And she went, come here. When he next bends over to take a photograph, just go back up behind him and just grab his balls. And I was like, oh my God, can I? And then he just bent over, and I just went up behind and I just squeezed them really tight. Like some overripe peaches. It was not lovely at all.
How did he react?
He jumped a mile, and then he did laugh.
Okay, that's
He did
quite
laugh.
good.
Yeah, because otherwise he'd have felt humiliated.
Okay, I'm going to make a guess and we can cut this out. Was it? Of course it fucking was. I knew it. We can bleep that, but I guessed correctly.
Yeah. And his wife was on that shoot.
Oh my God, that's not right, is it? Okay, I'm going to read you a quote from your thing here, which is, this is what you said generally about fashion. And I think that fashion can be really misunderstood. And you've expressed a lot about like fashion shows and your windows, and, people can be dismissive about fashion, but this is what you said about your windows. I want people to stop, stare and feel something. It might be that's bonkers, or that's beautiful, or that's bloody wonderful, but it should always end with, I want to be part of that. That's what will make customers come to the shop floor. And I think that's really interesting, because fashion is obviously an expression of the self and all that kind of stuff, but if you make it as exciting and tempting a world, then people want to go in. And that's what you were trying to do, wasn't it?
Yeah, I wanted them to walk through those doors and feel the alchemy of, God, this smells great. Oh, that music's great. That choice of, and they see a mannequin that's just styled so beautifully, or makes them laugh, or there's an installation, or they can, their service, or people greet them and actually talk to them and dance snooty. And all of those things, which was my job. It wasn't just the windows. Every touch point or every nuance to me felt just so important. And to this day, I go in to businesses and I know that they could be making so much more if they just tweaked what they already have. And I think they just don't understand. It's like a great hotel or a great restaurant. Someone turns up to you and greets you at the door and makes you feel magical. I've got your seat, don't worry. You're waiting. It's just the most fundamental human connection to feel. I never ask people, wasn't there that great Maya Angelou? People will forget what you said, but they'll never forget how you made them feel.
Yeah.
And that just goes so deep. And I felt that every touch point, it was like I felt like a little orchestra leader. It's everything from what fabric you use on the dressing room curtains to, how we wrote our signage, what packaging, what we said on the coffee label when you bought that coffee.
Yeah.
Everything touches and connects, and to me that was the ultimate, and still to this day is.
Yeah, and when you were writing about it, because obviously that's part of what you were doing in Harvey Nichols, and people were like going to, different departments. When I was very young, I can remember department stores in Manchester, and sort of Kendall's was where people went. But you mentioned two shops when you're kind of like going along Oxford Street, kind of looking for inspiration at that time. And where you felt you found it was in two shops that were really big at the time. One was HMV and one was Gap, which I'd almost forgotten because Gap is so rubbish now. But it was hugely important in the 90s, wasn't it?
So HMV, it was thronging, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I
love a record
listen
shop.
to me. So do I. And I think, again, why we're seeing a regeneration of those businesses that actually touch the senses. We're seeing record shops come back, and wonderfully we're seeing a return to vinyl. We're seeing bookshops come back because they were tactile, they had knowledge, they had insight. You spoke to someone in a record shop, and they knew the music.
Yeah.
They knew their stuff.
You could go in and say, what's the one that goes, and they know what it is.
And they know what that was. Or, when I was a kid, we used to go into the little booths house. And just, I remember Strawberry Fields in Rickmansworth, standing in the booth with my earphones on and listening to music. So I think this, now the other one, yes, was so HMV, and I was so sad when that one, it was just everything was tactile, wonderful and connected. And the other was Gap. Gap was, it just had that buzz, and the Gap ads as well, where they just danced, and you had these sort of cool, young Gap kids who were all dressed in the gear. And at Christmas, they'd have the choir. They have this fabulous black choir singing with the striped scarves on, standing in the, it was just joyous, and also, the rhythm of it.
Yeah, and it also had that thing that was quite prevalent in the 90s, which was quite androgynous.
Yes, it was.
Do you know
totally
what I mean? So like you could wear, the clothes seemed to kind of, it didn't really matter if what gender you were, it was kind of suitable for you.
Exactly, which is what Uniqlo's now taken that space in.
Yeah.
But that was Gap, and it was just joyous, and it was a really cool business.
Yeah.
And there are some that are doing that now. I think Ganni's doing a really good job, and you have the Ganni girls. There's an energy that's about that brand, and it often comes, I talk about this time and time again. I think what happened so much is we let the finance and the money guys take over business, because we saw business as operational rather than as a creative act. And
this is very clear in the book, that basically the money guys come in and God love them, they're boring.
They're not the ones who come up, I've got this idea, I've got this collection. I have two real beliefs that what makes great businesses is the product and the branding, that makes people go, that's my kind of scene. Oh my God, I love that. That's my kind of scene. And then the money guys manage it, get us out there, make it, but you never are the one with the idea. Sorry, just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
But they're at the top of the businesses.
Yeah, okay. Well, it's all right. There's not many money men on this programme, I have to say. Okay, there's another bit that you say, which I really enjoyed, which is, you say, so when your babies, you have your first two kids, Milo and Verity, very close together.
Yes, 20 months.
And you played Oasis a lot to them. You played What's the Story to them.
And they've just been to the big one in Manchester. They've got tickets. Yeah, well, yeah, they have together, and it just was. And they did the Stone Roses as well. So it's those albums that were the 90s that were. But I love that, the big sounds that come out of the north anyway. It's just my kind of music anyway. And
anthems.
The anthems, and the other one that I loved was a brilliant band called Son House that had this incredible album called Crazy on the Weekend. And I used to play these non-stop. But I remember Milo was literally just stood in a nappy and he just went, Champagne Supernova. I was like, what? He was 18 months and just came out of that line. And I could see him to this day in his little red hair saying that to me. And that was just a really big. And the other album I played non-stop, I used to pick them up to and I danced to was M People's How Could I Love You More?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
That was
another more
I just
Mancunian
loved
band.
all that northern sound that came through. I thought that to me was the 90s. The early
Did you
90s.
ever get musicians coming into Harvey Nichols? Because it wasn't really a musician-y type show.
Oh, the Oasis boys used to come in all the time. Yeah, you'd see them going around. Yeah, loads of them come in. And I remember seeing the lads from Crowded House. They were big then. I loved all that gang.
That's quite funny to think of Oasis going in.
Because it was cool. It was where all the designers were.
I suppose, you could just nip in and get your Burberry or whatever, Stone Island.
They'd be coming in and sitting up in the cafe, in the restaurants, and the bar. Yeah, we had a lot all the time. I mean, you had famous actors. It was constant, But the one where it was as if someone, just before you go to a theatre and it's just about the curtain up and it goes just that quiet when Princess Diana came in. You just knew. There was just funny. That.
She's here.
She's here. And yet all the big Hollywood stars and the biggest bands would not have that same. It was just as if everyone went, wow. And the customers as well,
Yeah, that's very funny. And what happens if you're a Princess Diana? Do you buy or do you just go around and point at things? What's happened?
Oh, it all gets sent to. So you'd buy, she'd go round, or the palace would ring beforehand, say she's coming in, and the personal shopping manager would oversee and be with her. Or if she decided to pop in, which she often would do, not tell anyone, then everyone knew that you just sent it down to the personal shopping suite, so she didn't have to wait and put a card across and whatever.
Oh, yeah, exactly. That would be mortifying, wouldn't it? Oh, my God. Debit
or credit, Princess.
Exactly. Oh, dear. You're writing a cheque. Oh, dear. I think, when you come out of an era, do you feel the 90s was a particular time? I mean, we don't really believe in nostalgia in this show, meaning that, we look back, but we don't kind of stare. It's like, it's rude to stare. It's like, it is a time that we're celebrating, but it's still, it's not like we're saying, oh, this is the best time that's ever existed. It's just a particular time. What do you think of that 90s at that time?
I love that we don't stare. I'm with you on that. And I write at the end, I'm not one to be trapped in nostalgia. And because I think I'm one of these people that believes that you can be generative and create things better and make things better. I generally just do believe that. I think there were some extraordinary things, but a lot of that has to do with youth and being there and going through those ages where everything's new and you're navigating the world. So I think, that as you get older, that excitement does go for sure, but then wisdom and different types of beauty take its place. I think for the retail industry that I was in and still am to an extent is that the digital world took away a lot of physical connection. And that is something I think as humanity we crave. It's just, the fact, I haven't seen you in I don't know how long, the fact that we're sitting here and it's like come into the studio, because we could all do this over Zoom, but it's so lovely to be sitting, catching up, just those lovely little nuanced things or talks that you say, or God, I like your shirt, that looks lovely. Those things are so important to us. And I talk about, Jane Jacobs was this incredible, I don't know what she'd even call herself. She wasn't an architect, but she wrote this book called The Death of the American City in the 60s. And she talked about all those small, which seemed like futile, small, insignificant things of running out to the shops and chatting to someone and bumping into someone and saying, oh, can your daughter babysit on Thursday night or whatever? Actually, that is what we crave and we're neurobiologically wired to do. And I think the internet, which has brought so much, God, I've learned so much through it, and I certainly do, and music and so much it's brought to us. But it has taken away that need to go out. It's a bit like having a dog. You go, oh, do I have to go out in the bloody rain and walk the dog? Yes, you do. And then you suddenly go out and you go, that was better coming out. God, I feel better after that. And that physicality of shopping and popping out to the shops or getting, or even delayed gratification, I think we've lost that. But I think post-COVID, we've realised that more than anything. And I think we're coming out of that and resetting a kind of smaller way to live, actually, and not in a parochial way, but in a community-based, focused way to live. Like today here, as we said, someone said, I've got a car to pick up. I want to walk down that high street here. I love it. And I want to walk down, pop into something, because it just makes you feel that bit better. So that's what I miss from the 90s. I don't miss the sexism. I don't miss the patriarchy and the power of the male. I don't miss that. And I think there's so much that's moved forward. The things like the Me Too movement, Black Lives Matter. I think we're a kinder society. And I think we've just got to keep creating and understanding the beautiful things that make us feel alive, music being one of them. I mean, look at how that's just grown. I mean, every time I'm talking to my kids, I don't think there's a Glastonbury they've missed.
Yeah, it's important.
And they get something higher every year and they're like, what?
Yeah, that's true.
But it's just, I think we're clawing back and understanding what we lost. And I love this kind of transitional time that we're going through, trying to recreate.
Yeah. Okay, so look, talking music, at Talk 90s to Me, we have a playlist featuring 90s music, which you can find on Spotify. I haven't warned you about this.
Oh, no, you
have to pick a 90s track. And you can't pick Champagne Supernova because Irvin Welsh picked that. So you have to pick a 90s track that we can feature on Spotify. What would you like to pick?
Well, it's really difficult because Radiohead was so massively, and I think it would have to be Fake Plastic Trees.
Oh, that's all right. That's definitely allowed.
That's just so good, isn't it?
Yeah, we love that track, of course. That's another track that you can play to your kids, and then it's like folk music for kids.
And I also kind of think it's like, was talking about that fake plastic, and it's sort of partly this what we're going through, which was pushed by sort of the fashion and beauty industry. And I'm like, I don't know, there's something remarkable in the lyrics in that. So I'm going to take Radiohead.
Okay, that's great. I completely approve. Okay, that was Talk 90s to Me, featuring the wonderful Mary Portas, whose absolutely fabulous book, Do You Get It? I Shop, Therefore I Am. The 90s, Harvey Nichols and Me is out now now, and it really is an absolutely excellent read. For a different, perhaps more musical take on the 90s, why not try Uncommon People, Britpop and Beyond in 20 songs, written by an obscure author called Miranda Sawyer, who is me. Describe to Talk to 90s to me on your podcast app. Join our Patreon for gorgeous merch and special extra episodes on things like shoes. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram and Blue Sky. See you next time.